everybody. Welcome to Alexa Developer Office Hours. We are back today. It is June 27th. Thank you all for joining us today on Developer Office Hours. Wonderful to see you. I'm Amanda Lange. I'm the community manager for Alexa Developers and one of our evangelists here at Amazon. Joining me today on the stream is Sid Dube, who is going to talk to us today about Alexa, monetization, and in-skill purchasing. Normally, when I start the stream, I have a lot of announcements for y'all. This morning, I don't have a lot of announcements, although I do want to share a couple blog posts, which we're going to talk to as this progresses. And I also want to remind you that next week is a holiday here in the United States. It is the 4th of July. It happens to fall on Tuesday. So we're not going to have a show next week, but the following week, we're going to have our Alexa champion, Ethan Richardson, on, and he's going to be talking about making beautiful experiences in APL. I've seen some of the graphic work stuff, really tremendous. So if you want to learn more about APL, tune in to that. It's going to be a really cool conversation. But today we have Sid on here. Thank you so much for coming to the show. I'm really excited to dig into this topic. It's going to be really fun. So do you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can get started with the questions.
Hey, Amanda. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much again for having me here. I manage the Alexa monetization team, especially when it comes to 3P developers. And so if you're thinking about in-skill purchasing, paid skills, Alexa skill deals, or basically trying to be able to build a sustainable business on Alexa through in-skill purchasing, I'm the right person to be able to reach out to. I'm here to talk about basically what we have in store for the coming year, any questions that the team may have, especially when it comes to potential pitfalls when it comes to setting up in-skill purchases, and maybe a couple of helpful tips that developers can implement within their skills to ensure that their customers are seeing exactly what developers want to provide to them.
Thank you. And hi to everybody out there in chat. We've got a few of our regulars joining us today. It's appreciated. Let's just start the topic off by talking about the different ways that people can monetize skills with their skills. So like, what are the basic categories of monetization for our developers?
Sure. So just for context, monetization, at least of skills, began somewhere in 2018 when we did launch in-skill purchasing. We've come a long way since then, where we've not only made additional feature changes to in-skill purchasing, but launched additional ways to be able to monetize, be it through paid skills, be it through Alexa skill deals, and another recently launched feature, which is the Alexa shopping kit. I think you've maybe spoken about that on previous office hours as well, but that's another way for developers to be able to monetize. But primarily, I would say there are two big ways that you can monetize within skills. The first one is in-skill purchases. And think of these as what we know in the world as freemium skills. So basically, your skills have a significant amount of free content with it. Once your customer actually plays around with the free content, they then have the opportunity to be able to purchase slightly more premium content. And that's our biggest...
I lost your
sound. There are three ways to monetize.
Oh, sorry, your microphone cut out there for a second. It was interesting.
So there are three big ways to be able to monetize even within in-skill purchases. You have the ability to be able to offer subscriptions, which is basically a monthly or an annual recurring subscription charge that you charge from customers, and you give them access to your premium product. You have one-time purchases where a customer just has to make a one-time payment, post which they have entitlement for the lifetime of the product. And then the third one is consumables, which are typically hints or gems or some things that can be reused by customers that once they get over with, the customer typically goes and replenishes all of those purchases again. And so those are the three big ways. Even within the paid skill category, which is slightly different from in-skill purchases, in that case, you basically don't offer any free content. But when a customer actually tries to launch your skill, they are given an option to be able to make a purchase for their premium content. And even within paid skills, we support one-time purchases. Typically, freemium skills are most popular model with developers, and that's one that we definitely encourage developers to start with. It just gives the customer an understanding of exactly what kind of product you're trying to provide to your customer, before they actually make any monetary investment and take a purchase forward.
Great. So I think it's very similar to the app world in some respects, where there's some apps where you can't download it until you pay. And there are some skills where you can't activate it until you pay. But most people want to try before they make a purchase. They want to have like a try before you buy aspect, right?
Exactly. And that's why I would say freemium skills or in-skill purchases are some of our most popular tools. Most customers still want to experience what exactly the skill is, what the content within the skill is, and whether a particular use case for it that they want to take forward. And that's why we at least encourage developers who are new to monetization to be able to start with in-skill purchases and then work their way over to the paid skill side. Typically, again, paid skills, we see a number of developers who already have an established product.
Your microphone's doing, hang on, I'm going to cut you off right there. Your microphone's doing that thing again. I hate to do this while we're live, but it's like every once in a while.
Let me just try it without headphones and see if that works.
Yeah, maybe that'll help. Yeah, I don't know. There's like an interference or something. I'm sorry. All right. You were talking about the in-skill purchasing. One of the questions that I have is, I think there's multiple different categories, but I know that some categories are a little more popular than others. What do you think is the strongest category for most of our developers?
I think the one that's most exciting and is basically the games category and the music and audio category. Typically, Alexa, also, I think some of the most popular use cases involve asking Alexa to be able to play music, or especially a number of our Echo family devices are located in communal spaces where typically the family tends to gather around, giving them an opportunity to be able to get together as a family and enjoy an interactive game session. And that's why those are some of our most popular categories. I think another upcoming category that's gaining a bunch of popularity is the health and wellness category. Especially during the pandemic, there were lots of opportunities for customers to want to continue to stay engaged in fitness and health applications, which is where we saw a surge in those kinds of applications come forward. And now they've kind of become the norm, especially when it comes to sleep sounds or just trying to stay fit with yoga videos. Those are some categories that we see have started to emerge and are almost as popular now as our games and music categories.
Oh, that's really nice. So like a paid exercise subscription, for example, if somebody wants to download workout videos or audio tracks?
Exactly. I think paid exercise is definitely one. Also, just meditation and relaxing sounds are a great way to be able to focus. I think we've got some great developers out there who've been focusing on the sleep category. However, we've also seen a couple of players like Endel come in that try and focus more on just calming sounds. Basically, if you're trying to get some work done or trying to get some studying done, it's a great way to be able to put on these AI soundscapes that run in the background and just help you focus on the work that you're trying to do.
Really cool. Interesting. When someone is a customer and they're looking at purchasing something, what are the different stages of that for the customer? How do we go from the beginning of discovering the skill all the way to actually like the purchasing experience?
Yeah, at least how we internally at Alexa try and think of this is we try and break it down into 4 different stages. It's basically a discovery stage, an engagement stage, an upsell stage, and then typically a purchase or a conversion stage. And what I like to do is, and what I encourage developers to do is just on a piece of paper, try and break down your entire purchase funnel across these 4 stages. An easy way to be able to do that is if you have a slightly distant family member who doesn't really know what kind of product you're working on, it would be great to be able to just send them a version of your skill, and if they have an Echo family device at home, and just ask them to put down their thoughts across these 4 stages. And that's a quick way for you to be able to identify, okay, I may have a couple of challenges in this particular stage, which is why I need to spend most of my time or attention there. And we typically have a bunch of really simple questions, which is like, hey, was it easy for you to be able to find my product? Did you understand what I was trying to get out of that product and what I was trying to share with my customers? If you didn't know me, is it something that you would still buy? And I know it's hard, especially when it's family members, But it's great for them to be able to just give you an honest answer, so you know whether you're headed in the right direction or not.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to piggyback off that question just a little bit. What are your best practices for the upsell part of the experience? Because I think that that's one of those things where developers really need a lot of advice. Like, how do I get my user from using the skill to making that leap to purchase?
Yeah, I would say even before you get to the upsell part, the stages that I would really focus on are the discovery and the engagement sections. It's unless you feel that, or unless you have a lot more confidence in the first two stages, I would stay away from the upsell or optimizing the upsell part of things. And this largely goes back down to, I think the question that most developers have is, when's the right time to upsell? And the only way to be able to determine that is if you know your customers have hit a certain threshold when it comes to the first two stages, which precede the upsell stage. And so it goes back to trying to focus on just how many unique customers do you have? And I think we do a great job of trying to provide developers with a bunch of different skill metrics. And some of the metrics to be able to really focus on are, well, how many unique customers do I have? How many skill sessions take place during a day? How many utterances do I have within a skill session? And I think unless you have confidence that you're hitting the right thresholds when it comes to these different metrics, it doesn't really make sense to be able to focus on the upsell side of things. And that's why we'd always say focus on the discovery side. Once you know what kind of audiences are reaching your skills, and if they're spending enough time in your skill, then it's the right time to be able to focus on upsell and take that forward. I'll give you an example. If you feel that you have customers out there who are maybe doing one skill session per week, maybe doing an upsell every time they launch the skill isn't the best way to be able to try and sell your product to the customer, because they clearly still need at least 2 or 3 different skill launches before they truly understand what kind of product you're trying to sell to your customers. And so I think knowing your metrics upfront and then knowing exactly how your customer interacts is a great way for you to be able to transition to the next stage, which is basically the upsell stage.
Interesting. But I think I have a game development background, so I think I try to think of everything through a game lens. And especially when you're thinking about something like a consumable or even a subscription model, don't you kind of have to have those ideas in your head already when you develop and design your game? Like, what am I gonna sell with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's when you think about the upsell, I think it's a great way to be able to understand your product before you decide which kind of monetization model you want to go for, whether it's a subscription, a one-time purchase, or a consumable. I think that's something that you need to lock down before you open up monetization or before you take ISP forward. I think the part where it becomes, or at least where we hear the most feedback is, hey, how do we do an upsell and when's the right time to upsell? And so how do we do an upsell is a question where you figure out, well, what kind of marketing message do you provide to your customers, and what are your key value propositions that you're trying to provide to your customer? And then when do we do an upsell, which is the part that you're talking about, which is, hey, I know I need a one-time purchase or a consumable. This is the right time to do an upsell. When the customer has cleared X level or is stuck on X problem, that's when you actually trigger the upsell, rather than trying to do a spray and pray kind of methodology, which is basically whenever the customer launches a skill, hey, it's an opportunity for me to be able to sneak in an upsell and see if they'd be comfortable taking it forward. We've seen in the past that usually tends to reduce the amount of time a customer spends on a skill, or kind of puts them off if that's not exactly what they were looking for at that point of time. So it becomes very critical to be able to focus on the exact opportunity as to when you want to take that upsell forward.
Interesting. I think there'd be a lot to consider, especially if with the voice only. Can people have the ability to make purchases using the screen devices as well, though?
Yeah, absolutely. We support purchasing through both voice and touch. Now, if you're on a headless device, obviously voice is the only way that you can interact with it. But typically, especially if the customer has a multimodal or a screen device in front of them, they have the opportunity to be able to use either touch or voice to be able to engage with their purchase. We've seen that on multimodal devices, when there is a display running, Customers are more comfortable just using physical interaction to be able to engage with the device and basically take those purchases forward, which is why we support them. But we do realize a large number of devices also are headless devices, especially in bedrooms or in bathrooms or in places where people typically tend to put these devices. And so voice is also a great way to be able to interact with it, and we do support purchasing.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I would be more likely to click on something too, like especially if it's like for a game, because I might have that almost like an impulse, like, oh, I'm going to push that little button. I think that's where, particularly for game developers, like colorful graphics really come into play, like things that are like seem like cool to buy. So if it's going to be like a consumable potion, you're going to make it pretty and shiny so people want it, even if it's just something that gives you a benefit in the game, right? But I think you can also do that with audio too. Particularly with the ambient sounds type categories, maybe make something a little bit more enticing and interesting for the customer.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we do encourage developers is you should be supporting both sets of devices, headless and multimodal devices. In fact, we have some great APL templates available, which developers should definitely utilize to be able to support those. And I think we've even got to a stage where developers are using Web API to be able to support a lot more graphics. And so if that's something that your skill can support, we'd encourage you to be able to even support all of that within ISPs or purchasing, especially when it comes to marketing messages. And you have a great opportunity to be able to use the entire real estate of the Echo device to be able to, again, clearly demonstrate the differences between the free version of your product and the premium version of your product, which is, again, the second biggest piece of feedback, or not the second biggest, it's the most important piece of feedback that we get from customers, because they say, why should I spend more money when I can get the same product for free? And so it's the exact reason why we want you to be able to spend more time just on that marketing message and on those colorful graphics that you were talking about.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm starting to see some questions coming in the chat, which is great, and we're going to get to those. But before we go to those, I do want to ask, we've got a Prime Day coming up. What can I do as an Alexa developer to prepare for Prime Day? How can I optimize maybe something about deals?
So one, Prime Day is a great way for you to just have a number of sales on your product. I think that's the one big key thing that everyone talks about. However, I like to focus on the other aspect of Prime Day is it's a lot of traffic coming to your products, which means it's a great time to be able to do experimentation and testing. So just for context, Prime Day, we do sell a lot of Echo devices, which means there will be a large number of activations that take place immediately after Prime Day. And these activations tend to go on for the next month. I believe Prime Day this year is on the 11th and 12th of July, which means all the way until August, we will be shipping out devices and customers will be opening devices for the first time, which means there's just going to be a surge of activations that take place. So the two things that I typically tend to recommend during high traffic events are one, obviously implement something like Alexa Skill Deals. For context, Skill Deals is basically a feature that we launched last year that offers promotional discounting across all your products, and the promotional discounting is temporary, which means, say, for example, you have a product for $9.99. For the next 2 months, anyone who signs up for that product will be charged $3.99 per month, post which they will go back to the $9.99 a month plan. Which just gives customers a great way to be able to experience the skill at a much reduced rate temporarily, see if there's value in taking it forward, and then revert back to the original pricing. So that's something that I definitely encourage all developers to be able to take forward, especially in the month of July and August for Prime Day. And the second one is just, like I was saying, is experiment, because you have a lot of traffic coming in. And great things to experiment are your marketing message. If you want to try and play around with your key value propositions and see which resonates better with customers, if you want to play around with the length of the free trial that you're offering, we now support free trials from anywhere from 1 day to 90 days. And so depending on what kind of skill you have and what kind of offering you have, it's a great way to be able to determine that sweet spot that results in the greatest purchase conversion.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's one of the most common questions I get about people who are trying to go for paid skills or ISP is there a way to do
Sure.
sales? Is there a way to do temporary discounts? Because they
Yeah.
just want to try to entice people. I know that if there's like a really cool game I want to buy, a lot of times I'll wishlist it and see if the price drops, And I think
Sure.
maybe people might look at skills the same way, like, ooh, is there going to be a deal
Yeah.
on Prime Day? I think we'll wait and see if I can maybe get that at a deal. But often a short-term discount, if you get more volume that way, you get word of mouth. So it's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, and I think the added advantage of just using skill deals is the C exchanges that have been made to be able to support skill deals. We have strike-through pricing, which it's a small feature, but we've seen, especially with customers, it's super attractive to be able to see a slash through prices. I think we've all experienced that during sales.
Oh yeah, it's a good feeling.
Exactly. And so even if it's a small discount, it still encourages customers to be able to try and give your skill a try and see if it works out for them or not. But it's a great way to be able to see a large amount of traffic. Typically in the past, we've seen anywhere from a 20% increase in sales all the way up to 50% increase, again, depending on the kind of skill or content that you're trying to sell. But it's a great way for you to be able to get more customers and simultaneously determine what kind of price points make sense for your skill.
And if I'm looking at the metrics on my skill, how do I know if I've got the right choice? I think one of the other big question that I get from developers is like, how do I know if I set the right price? How do I know if I'm doing I'm choosing the right time? What metrics could help me make those decisions?
Yeah. So again, I think it goes back to that on the piece of paper, the 4 stages that I was talking about is just trying to figure out which ones are important. Like I mentioned, on the discovery side, just knowing how many unique customers you have per month is a great way for you to be able to determine what your total potential revenue could be. Now, let's say you have 100,000 unique customers coming in per month. I think in your absolute best case scenario, the total revenue would be 100,000 into the recurring price that you have of your ISP. So at least you know what your maximum achievable sample size is. And then you can accordingly work your way down to be able to determine how much truly you can make out of a skill. So I think that's one great way to be able to start and determine just your total opportunity size. I think as you keep going further down the purchase funnel, let's say you go into the next stage, which is basically your engagement stage. It's trying to look at how many utterances you get in a day to be able to determine, or how many unique skill sessions you get in a day. That just tells you how often you should be upselling your customers at any point of time. As you move into the upsell stage, we have something called the upsell conversion rate, which is basically how many customers are comfortable saying yes to your marketing message. If you play around with your value proposition or your why buys, you can see that number fluctuate up and down, and that'll tell you whether you're headed in the right direction or not. And then finally, the 4th stage that I was talking about is the conversion stage, at which point of time the customer is told the price of the product and the free trial length. And again, if you look at your offer conversion rate, you'll be able to determine whether you're setting too high a price or too low a price. And again, I think it's a great question. The only thing is there's no perfect answer to what's the right price for your product. We've got a couple of stories and developer blogs that you may come across, and we'll try and put it in the chat. But there are some great use cases where customers or where developers have tried to just graph out their different purchase points. And so they've tried to start with a $199 price point, move it up to $299, then go $399, $499, and keep sketching out what the purchase conversion rate looks like to be able to determine at which point of time is there a significant drop-off in customer purchase conversion. And they say, okay, great. Now this has happened. We know at least what our maximum threshold looks like. And accordingly, we know at least the range that we can play around with. So that's one way to be able to do it. But unfortunately, I think my most important tip here is just iterate and optimize. Unfortunately, it's very hard to be able to get all the inputs right on your first attempt. And so you just have to keep going through that process again and again before you feel familiarity with it.
And in the chat just now, I posted one of the blogs that we have that shows what those conversion and churn metrics look like. Just showing you some of the examples of the screens that you'll see when you start looking at your metrics. Maybe that'll help some people to make better decisions. It's really useful to have all that data. I did see a question come in the chat. I did get an answer for you as well from LinkedIn asking, hey Sid, great to see you in office hours, which yes, is great to have you. Thank you. What is the plan for associates account linking for Alexa shopping in India? So the answer I have for you right now is that Amazon Associates on Alexa is currently only available in the US and UK regions. We are working to roll that feature out in other locales, but we just don't have a set time to share with you, unfortunately. Of course, you'll know as soon as we do when we're ready to set that out. Can you talk a little bit about what Associates account linking means for those that may not know?
Oh, sure. I think it's part of the Alexa Shopping Actions Kit. And so I believe associate account linking is basically allowing you to be able to get referral fees by linking out to products that are available on Amazon.com through your skills. And so that's a great way to be able to at least, let's say, for example, you have a yoga skill that we were talking about. It's a great way to be able to get customers to be able to go through an entire yoga session and then post that, be directed to products that fit perfectly with the skill. So it could be, say, a yoga mat or a yoga block. And you can redirect customers to be able to add those products to their cart within the Echo device itself. As long as the customer makes a purchase, you get a percentage of that sale through a referral fees. And that's another way to be able to make money, which is more the sale of a physical product rather than a digital product, which is what typically ISPs and paid skills work for.
Right. I know the shopping kit is relatively new. When did we launch that? I think it was just last year.
That's correct. I believe it was last year when it went into GM.
And how's that going for developers? Are we seeing some uptake in that in terms of what people are buying? I'm curious to know what people's creative ideas are for how to tie their skill to a product, because the yoga mat, the exercise equipment, that's one great idea. There's a lot of other stuff out there though. We were talking about like a pet skill where you could buy pet treats. Have any cool stories about what people are doing with it?
So I think, I don't know if it's in place yet, but I know there are some excellent pet skills out there, which are especially around calm my dog and soothe my cat, which are some of our really popular skills, especially when they play music that's absolutely customized to certain animals. But I think that's a great way to be able to build synergies where you can say, hey, I can make money using in-skill purchases and paid skills by selling a subscription to something like calm my dog. And then simultaneously also continue to make money by the sale of physical products. So it's a two-tiered approach that typically tends to go forward, where you have the ability to be able to use digital and physical sales to be able to make money and build a sustainable business. So we're still seeing developers play around with Alexa Shopping Kit to be able to determine what exactly would make for an ideal use case. But we've already started seeing some use cases that are successful examples.
I think ISP is still like one of the biggest opportunities for our developers, though, especially with the rise of different ways to interact with the skill and the head end of the devices with the screens and everything.
Exactly. I think ISPs is just a much quicker way to be able to build a product that's exactly suitably tailored for what you're working on, because you have full control of it. You don't really have to worry about the synergies that come in when it comes to physical products. So I think it's a great way to be able to start. And ISP is a great way to, to be able to start for developers that are new to Alexa. And then we see these synergies build up over time as you become more familiar with the ecosystem, and then you can take that forward.
Wonderful. I'm going to post a couple more links in the chat because we also have the tech docs that we can share with the ISP. The way to get started on your own skill. If you have any questions about how to implement that and how to use that in your own skill, those tech docs are being linked there. Oh, there. Some of them are a little bit of a long link, but you should be able to see that showing up on the screen. We've got a variety of really good documentation to help people get started with all of that. Next question. This is a tricky one, but what's coming up for you and your team? What's coming up in the future with ISP in particular?
And it's typically, I think the big part, or at least the big changes that I know I've covered in maybe a previous blog or so, is the monetization team is spending a lot more time just really focusing on exactly what developers need. And most of our roadmap is now built based on feedback. That's largely how we want to take it forward, because it's kind of pointless launching something that developers don't want. So we've spent a lot of time and I'm available on Slack if any developers have comments, especially through the Alexa developer community. If you want at any point of time, you can reach out to me and let me know exactly what it is you're looking for. But I think the big piece of feedback that we've received is we've launched in-skill purchases, we've launched in-skill purchases, we've launched paid skills, which are typically, and we've launched Alexa skill deals, which are typically the fundamental building blocks. At least that's how I like to think about it. And developers want to get to a place where they're like, hey, are there better ways for me to be able to combine these and play around with them and really build a sustainable business? And so we've now hit a point where, or critical mass in some sense, where we have developers that have 2+ ISPs. We've got some developers which have 100+ ISPs, but typically we see a number of developers out there that have at least 10 ISP products at a time. And the big feedback that we've received is, hey, you know what? Customers find it really challenging to be able to buy 10 different ISP products, and it becomes hard to be able to manage them. If I have to cancel one, where do I go? How do I manage it? Do I cancel 3 of them? What do I do with the balance 7? And I think they want to get to a stage where, at least from a customer standpoint, we want to make it super easy for a customer to be able to manage their products. And from a developer standpoint, we want to make it super easy for them to be able to market their products. And so we started working on at least bundling, which is basically the opportunity to be able to combine multiple products together and give it to the customer as with a single price, with a single subscription. All they have to do is manage that single product, and they get access to all the 10 or 15 or 100, in some cases, 100 different ISPs that a developer is sharing with customers. So that's what we're excited about, and that's what's coming next for us. Hopefully, we can talk about it as the year progresses a little bit more, just in terms of launch dates. But that's something that we're really excited about, and we feel that's the next step of evolution for in-skill purchasing. I think that's one. The second one that, again, we really want to focus and double down on is just going back to providing more insights and being more transparent when it comes to metrics. I think when we launched ISP back in 2018 and 2019, we provided an initial set of metrics, but we've come to a point where developers really understand how to use Alexa, and they want to see if they can double-click on those metrics a little bit more and get finer cuts of that data and see what's out there so that they can make slight modifications. And again, I speak about iteration and optimization. You can only do that if you have that further level of granularity. And so that's the next stage for us, is to be able to be more clear with our metrics, expand on our definitions for our metrics, and really work with you all to be able to understand exactly what it is you need, so that you can make the changes that you need to be able to support your customers better.
Really cool. Really cool. I really want to ask a couple more questions about that bundle idea, because I didn't realize there are people having 100 different ISPs on a single skill. Talk a little bit more about that. What kind of things could I bundle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for now, what we're trying to focus on is more, can we bundle? Let's say you have 100 different ISPs. Now, each ISP could potentially be priced anywhere from 99 cents all the way to I think we've seen $9.99 to $12.99 price points.
Oh, wow.
And so at some point of time, it becomes, even as a customer, and I try and put myself in the shoes of a customer who's using Alexa. And we've seen that especially on the streaming subscription side of things. I, as a customer, find it exceptionally complicated to be able to manage 10 different streaming services, all that have different price points and have different billing cycles. And so as a customer, what we want to do is make it easier for them to be able to say, hey, here are 100 different ISP products, but we'll package this as a single ISP product. So a customer only sees a premium ISP. And when they actually make that purchase, and a developer has the opportunity to be able to sell that single ISP for, let's say, $9.99. And once the customer makes a purchase for $9.99, we entitle them to all the 100 different ISPs in the back end. So tomorrow, whenever a customer opens up any skill under that developer sees that this customer has bought the $9.99 ISP, which means they automatically give them entitlement across those 100 different ISP products in the back end. So I think from a customer standpoint, it's easier to manage. The developer only has to worry about selling a single product. And all of the back-end work, which means the entitlement work, that's taken care of by Alexa. And so that reduces the debt that both the customers and the developer have to manage at the end of the day.
Wow, really cool. I'm trying to think of like what 100 things I could sell, but I guess if you have something like an ambient audio app, you could have a pretty wide selection of different things people could buy.
Absolutely. And 100, I think, is one of the use cases out there, but we definitely have developers out there with 10 different IPs, and they want to make sure that a customer basically has access to the premium version of their product, which gives them access to all the 10 different IPs internally. So we have some use cases where developers have come up with their own hub and spoke model, and they've tried to build their own solutions where they try and sell a single product and figure out the entitlement. But we want to try and remove that shift that problem over from the developer back to Alexa, where we figure out how to be able to manage it. And all you have to do is play around in the developer console and the GUI portion of the developer console, which just makes it super easy for them to be able to manage their products.
So I don't know how much you can speak to this, but I do have another question coming from LinkedIn, which is what kind of conversions do you get for non-gaming skills? And I'm going to preface asking that question by saying that, like I said, I come from a game development background. So when I think of in-game purchases, I do think of gaming skills first, but it seems like you also have a lot of non-gaming skills that people could converting on.
That's right. And again, I think one of our blog posts does talk about it, and it potentially is the same one, I think, that you've already pasted in the chat. But
I think so, yeah.
From an offer conversion perspective, we typically see anywhere from 6 to 10% at an offer conversion rate. And again, I think it goes back to the same thing. It's very dependent on what kind of category you're building for. So there are definitely some nuances, which is why I'm sharing a very wide range. But I think anywhere from a 6 to 10%, if you look at our averages across all the different categories out there, that's a number that we potentially tend to see. We do definitely, especially when it comes to established use cases. Let's say, for example, it's sports, or it's something that a customer definitely knows that they want. The conversion rates are obviously higher because there's a less of a reason to be able to sell the product to a customer because they know exactly what they're looking for. And so you can see anywhere from 15 to 20% conversion rates. But typically, if it's a brand new product, you would see an average of anywhere from 6 to 10% conversion rate. And once you lock down on that number, it's then on you to be able to focus on the next stage, which is optimization, to get to that potentially 10% number that we're sharing.
And then you'd be looking at some of those metrics that I shared earlier with the blog and what shows up on your dashboard.
Exactly. The blog covers the exact metrics that you should be focusing on, especially when it comes to those 4 different stages that I spoke about. And that's a great starting point.
I think that's a really good lesson that you kind of brought up too, is that when you're focusing on a smaller target market, even if you might have less users, you might have more passionate users who are going to convert more strongly. And I think that's true in a lot of like niche hobbies, for example. Like if you're making something for specifically fans of a specific sports team, and you are passionate about that and they're passionate about that, you might actually get that higher conversion rate versus something that's kind of more broadly targeted toward a lot of people. You might get a lot more people who don't want to pay or who want to say free ride at that point. So I think it's part about tapping into that audience and what your audience is really looking for to buy and will pay for.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to like your customers are giving you great insights already. Just look at your negative reviews to be able to start with. Is the ones that we typically tend to see the most in is customers who are slightly disappointed that they've made a purchase, but they don't really see the difference between the free version of the product and the premium version of the product. So in a lot of cases, they're like, yeah, I mean, I think we were sold to begin with, but after spending some time with the product, we're not fully convinced that this is worth our money. And so that's a great place to be able to start. I think the second one is definitely something like unsupported intents. So it's several times where a customer may try and say, hey, take something forward, or they may try and speak into an intent which they expect to be a regular intent in the premium version of your product that just isn't supported yet. And they call it out, saying that this is the exact command that we gave to the Alexa device, and it responded with, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. And so those are the typical ones that we tend to see most regularly when we look at feedback across multiple set of skills. Now, obviously, your skill may be unique, but those are ones that we tend to focus on, and we'd recommend that developers support multiple voice intents outside of just the typical purchase intent. If there's a way for a customer to be able to learn more about your skill, and they say, hey, tell me more about a product, you're while it may not immediately result in a purchase, it will definitely push your customer more towards making a purchase because they just want to know what they're signing up for before making any decision.
Right.
As do
And
we
that
all.
leads more into those metrics. It leads more into that skill quality that we've talked about previously on previous episodes of like how responsive is your skill? Does it understand what the customer's asking? And how are you handling like some of the more common use cases for people to.
Absolutely. And that same problem exists, like I said, on the purchasing side as well. We call them purchase tangential intents, which, again, don't directly result in or may directly not result in a purchase. It's not going to be immediately the customer is going to say yes. But if tomorrow they want to learn more about the product, or they want to hear about maybe a review, or they want to see what your star rating looks like, I think those are points that customers are still interested in, and they still want to know what that is, regardless of whether they decide to make a purchase or not. Research definitely does show that it pushes them in the right direction towards making a purchase, but it's still something that needs to be supported.
And there was another great tip I heard in there, which is to make it clear what the difference is between the premium and non-premium version of your skill, and people know what they're buying and why they should do it.
Exactly. And I'm hopeful that there is a blog about that coming up as well. But we have some best practices when it comes to be able to setting up the right upsell message. And the first one definitely is, if you have a free trial, talk about the free trial. Mention it. Say that there is a free trial available, because that at least incentivizes customers to be able to give your skill an attempt. And then learn about it and take it forward and truly see what the difference is between the free version and the premium version. You don't just have to then make an argument saying, hey, the premium version is way better. You actually give them the opportunity to be able to experience it. And then the second one is, as you rightly pointed out, is just what are the key value propositions that are not available in the free version that they should be focusing on in the paid version. Now, again, I do understand that's hard given the fact that you only have maybe 20 to 30 seconds of an audio prompt to be able to provide to customers. But if that's the case, then I would really focus on utilizing those 20 and 30 seconds on just focusing on the key why buys, and maybe adding some quantitative data as well, which is, hey, you have access to 10 additional levels, rather than just saying you have access to additional levels, because that doesn't give the customer an understanding of exactly how much they're getting, were they to make that purchase.
Subscriptions are a pretty popular way to monetize, especially with games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you've seen that even in your side of the world as well. But I think subscriptions are a great way for developers to be able to get constant revenue. The only caveat, it's not really a caveat, it's basically what's required, is developers need to stay up to date and relevant with the content within their skill, which just means theme packs or events that coincide with actual events that are happening in the real world. It basically needs to update itself on a regular basis. So yes, there's definitely a lot more investment required, especially if you go down the subscription route. But just knowing that you have a regular set of customers who are comfortable with your product and who are engaged with your product just means that it helps build a more sustainable business model going forward.
Yeah, I actually love that. Theme packs and like holiday packs are super fun where it comes to gaming. Like you could say like, oh, this is, for those of us in the US, it's the 4th of July. Or you could say this is a summer pack and we're going to have all summer trivia questions or whatever it is that you're asking or whatever it is that you're using to monetize.
And just updating your utterances or voice prompts to be able to be more relevant. I think that's another part where we typically provide recommendations on is your upsell message should make sense to what the customer is doing at that point of time. It shouldn't be, okay, the customer is playing a game and then you cut and then you move to the next thing, which is, hey, there's an upsell available for X99. It's, can you naturally transition the customer to the upsell, which means, hey, congratulations on completing that level. I'm sure it was hard. We noticed that you took some time over there. Here's an upsell that could potentially help with making this easier going forward. Or as you said, here's the 4th of July weekend. I hope you're enjoying that time off. And accordingly, here's something that can be sold. So even if you don't make significant changes to your skill in terms of content, just making sure that your prompts are up to date, I think is a great way to be able to get a customer to feel, hey, this developer is concerned about this particular product and will continue to add updates to it and take it forward, which means even if I buy a product right now, it's not that I'll lose support for it 1 or 2 months down the line.
Awesome. So I'm thinking when I'm thinking about all this stuff, I'm thinking there's kind of two audiences for this conversation. One is a new skill builder who doesn't know about the different ways that you can make money with ISP, and they're starting to map out what their process and plan is for how they'll do purchasing. And then another audience is somebody who maybe already has an established skill. They already have a user base, but they're curious about how they can maybe make a little money off that skill that's already out there in the market, right? Both of those two different use cases. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the optimization tips kind of tend to work across the board for all kinds of developers, regardless of who they are or at what stage they are, as you rightly described. And I think the first stage is more about when is the right time to be able to monetize, which is, again, for absolutely new developers who are unfamiliar with ISP. And it goes back to how I started this conversation, is just focusing on your existing customer base and seeing whether you have that critical mass. Now, if you have, say, 100, 200 customers that are coming in, I think that's already a great start, but you can do the math to be able to figure out whether it makes sense for you to be able to monetize or not. And unless you feel comfortable with that monetization technique or that monetization number that you're coming up with, you should just focus on trying to be able to grow the traffic to your skill. There's a blog post out there by there's a developer out there called TMSoft that we've covered. We've covered them, and they spent a lot of time just focusing on things like NFI, which is name-free invocations, or discovery intents, and just spending a lot. I think it's called can fulfill request intent. Which is basically a great way to be able to drive more traffic to your skill, regardless of the monetization aspect of it. It's just making sure that when a customer says a generic or asks a generic question, there is an opportunity for your skill to be able to fulfill that request, which would just drive a lot more traffic coming in. And until they got that right, they didn't even worry about monetization. But that just made for an easier transition.
That makes sense, right? You want to focus on pleasing your existing users and making sure that you've got that user base. And it's sort of a time and money equation. Like, how many people do I think will I convert if it's 10%? Even if if you're very lucky and you have a very passionate audience, it could be more than that. Exactly. But is it worth is it worth the effort to do with that?
Absolutely. Which is why you just focus on growing your customer base and traffic and making sure that there is a significant retention, which just means, do you have customers coming back to use your skill? How much time are they spending on a daily basis within your skill, or within a session? How much time are they spending within your skill? Because that'll at least give you confidence that, hey, there's clearly something here, and now it's on me to be able to figure out how to monetize this and actually make money off of it. And customers would be happy to pay that money as long as you're transparent with them, saying that, hey, this is what we're offering. Do you feel that if I would charge you $199 or $299 per month, would you be comfortable supporting me? And we've seen several use cases out there where customers are comfortable doing that, as long as they feel there's a use case that fits naturally within their life.
Right. Really cool. Really cool. That brings me to what I'm going to talk about, my last topic of conversation, which is you guys are doing consultations for developers who want to learn more about how to use ISP to monetize, right?
That's correct. And we offer them, I think we've got a great team, which basically will work with you on a one-on-one office hour. We'll figure out what your skill is, what your content is, and we'll work with you to be able to figure out what are the different opportunities to monetize and what are the ways to be able to optimize the product. So yeah, it's truly what we like to call white glove service that we'd like to give any developer out there who's interested in taking monetization or ISPs forward.
Honestly, I'm going to post a link in the chat right now for anybody who is interested to fill out this form to talk about the ISP process and want to get that in-depth advice. But I gotta say, I think this is just a really cool service. The fact that this is open to any developer that wants to use ISP, right?
That's correct. Any developer who wants to use ISP, who's currently using ISP, and even if you don't have a skill in place, if you feel that there are questions that you have that potentially we can answer, you obviously have the Slack channels that Amanda, you posted that you can reach out to. But if you really want that dedicated attention, we can at least work with you to be able to figure out the opportunity size that exists out there.
Yeah, if you're watching this on demand later and you don't see chat, and come to our Slack, I'll post that up on the screen again. But for those of you that are in the chat right now, I posted a link to a form you can fill out. If you want to do a one-on-one consultation, if you want to get more feedback about how maybe you could make money with your skill idea, it could just be the idea you're working on, right? It doesn't even have to be a fully fleshed out skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great way to be able to also figure out, I think there are sometimes challenges that take place during the certification process, and there are some guidelines and rules that we have just to be able to ensure that our content is accurate. Even if if you don't have questions that come to monetization, you can always use us to be able to just ask us about what are typical pitfalls that you see when trying to submit a monetized skill for certification. It just helps you get ahead of the curve and reduce the back and forth that takes place sometimes when your skill may potentially be rejected for a violation.
Okay.
And we'd love to have your skills live as soon as possible rather than having to do the back and forth.
So it's just a way of like kind of preemptively checking to make sure like what you're trying to sell is okay. Do people sometimes get certification rejections for purchasing reasons?
Yeah, I think the most common reasons sometimes are the content that you may be trying to sell. I think in the US especially, we do allow ISP content for child-directed skills. And we just want to make sure that we're cautious with the kinds of messaging that we're putting out there and the content that we're putting within those child-directed skills. So typically that's, if you're thinking about doing that, I'd always encourage signing up for office hours and just trying to determine whether there are any restrictions around the content that you're trying to sell that may potentially cause a violation. And then I think the other ones are typically when it comes to testing in-skill purchases. Is we have a bunch of testers out there, but there are certain guidelines that come to what kind of content needs to be set up to allow for that testing. And typically, a number of our developers tend to fail on that just because they may not include all the different parameters that we're testing for. So it's just helpful to have that conversation. Not that that's going to prevent your skill from going live eventually, but it's just the 1 or 2 weeks that may be spent in that back and forth is something that we'd love to avoid.
Yeah. Question in the chat: how about ISP services in India? ISP is available in India. ISP is available globally. Well, all of our regions allow for in-scale purchasing, correct?
That's correct. It's and I can just recite those out. We offer it currently in the US, Canada, India, Japan, and then UK, France, Italy, Spain, and Germany.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And those consultations that I posted, those are available to our worldwide developers as well. We've had folks on here from all different countries talking about the certification. The ISP consultations are also available in all those regions that you just listed off, right?
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So even if you're not in the US, UK, if you're releasing in different languages, you may still fill out that form. Let us know. We'll consult with you about what you want to do for in-skill purchasing. There's no problems there. Yeah, the 101 consultation is available. Thank you for listing all the locales.
Yeah, sure.
It's nice to know like where people can take advantage of this stuff. And everybody out there in the chat, if you're releasing in any of the regions that Sid just mentioned, you have access to, as long as you're releasing in those regions, right?
That's correct. I think, and we have a lot of developers out there that have launched in the US and then decided to take their skills to other marketplaces, and it's an easy enough port, which means there's potential to be able to make money across multiple locales. Right. There are certain restrictions in India that we're still trying to work around, which prevents porting skills from inside and outside of India. But for most other use cases, we do support it. However, we are trying to work on just trying to lower those India restrictions as well.
Great. Yeah, I'm not speaking on behalf of legal. So if you have questions that are like specific to like what region has what restrictions, that's a good time to dig into the documentation or sign up for one of those consultations. And the consultation will probably 100%. Clarify anything in your region that might be important to you. Gosh, I think that's all my questions, and that's all the major questions I see from the chat. So we might be able to wrap it up for today. We're almost coming on 1 o'clock my time, but I think it's 10 o'clock your time. So thank you for coming out and joining us this morning to talk about all of this stuff. I'm really excited to see how people use ISP in creative ways. I think there's a lot of potential out there, especially in games. I'm a big advocate of games. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming by. And other stuff that's happening. So folks, once again, no show next week because it is 4th of July. But then the following week, we're going to have a great ASL conversation, and we're going to talk a little bit about visual experiences, which I'm excited about. And if you have any questions for Sid, jump in the Slack or just fill out that form I linked. We will get back to you, and we will consult with you even if you do not have a skill ready to go, even if you're just dreaming of a way, check with us and see if that idea will make money for you and your customers, because we really want to help our developers succeed.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, again, and thanks, Amanda, for having me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And well, talk to you guys in 2 weeks.